Welcome back to the Blue Chip Breakdown, Vols fans and other college football fans. I'm your host, Bull, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the college football playoff rankings, why it's biased, and what my college football playoff rankings would be. Now, just to start it off, the CFP did come out and say that their goal is to choose the top 4 teams in the entire country, regardless of who is the most deserving. So that would mean regardless of their record, regardless of what they've done lately, just the 4 best teams. So with all that being said, let's just pull up and take a look at what their Final Four is. All right, so we'll be focusing on the top 8. We've got Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Florida State, Oregon, Ohio State, who's not playing in a conference championship game, Texas, and Alabama. Now, first thing that I want to focus on is the strength of schedule for the top 4 teams. We see that the highest rated strength of schedule out of the top 4 teams is Michigan, and this is where that bias comes in, okay? We all know that that's an absolute and total joke. Michigan plays 2 teams every year in Ohio State and Penn State, and neither one of those teams were great this season, but they are still in the top 10. So that is, where that bias comes in. And why is it like that? Well, because this is all about making money. It's all about TV ratings. It's all about different regions being able to have an opportunity to play in this playoffs. And that is why Michigan has the highest rated strength of schedule. And that is another big part of the reason why you've got these other Big Ten teams in the top 10. Now, I'm not trying to say that Penn State or Ohio State are terrible football teams, but what I am saying is if you genuinely look at who they're playing up against versus who some of these other conferences are having to play up against, it is an absolute and total joke, okay? The Big Ten is by far the most boring conference to watch in all of college football. It's like watching 1970s ball. They're going to run the ball 70 to 90% of the time, and teams like Iowa, that's more towards that 90% of the time running the football, is playing in their conference championship. So to me, that conference is really kind of a joke. Again, there's really only 3 teams that can and probably should come out of that conference as a representative in the college football playoffs, at least as it stands currently. Now, the next highest rated strength of schedule in the top 4 is Washington. I actually think that Washington has had a pretty decent schedule, okay? Now, Pac-12, they're going to play good offenses. It's always been like that, and the defenses have not been great, okay? So Washington's played up against teams like Oregon. They're going to have to play them twice. They'll be playing them again tonight in the Pac-12 championship, USC, Utah, and, those are some pretty solid football teams, okay? They're not terrible. Obviously, USC has Caleb Williams, who is a Heisman Trophy candidate. Probably not going to win it this year. He did win it before. But, at least they've had to play up against some type of competition. And, it's not just a couple of teams. It's pretty solid from top to bottom. So, I would put their strength of schedule, up there. Definitely, I would say in the top maybe 1 to 2 teams in the Final Four. The third highest ranked strength of schedule in the top 4 is Florida State. And, Florida State, probably the best team that they played up against was LSU, I would say. LSU's got the best offense in the entire country. They don't play a whole lot of defense, but it's still SEC ball. And I'm not trying to be an SEC homer whenever I'm saying these things. I'm just kind of, again, keeping it real because we know that the best talent comes to the SEC. That's just what it is. The most talent, we're talking about guys that are big, fast, can move, versatile, can pretty much do it all. You're going to see that in the SEC, and LSU is loaded with that type of player. So that's why they were ranked so highly coming into the season, and that's why they're still kind of ranked, pretty high towards the end of the season, even though they've lost 3 football games. Outside of that, they haven't really played too many great teams. I do put more emphasis on the win in Florida than a lot of people are, because going down to the Swamp, playing up against a huge rival at night, that's a tough game, okay? That's not an easy game to win, especially with the backup quarterback. To me, that speaks volumes about how deep Florida State is as a team. But we'll get to that a little bit more towards the end of this video. I think that Florida State's got a pretty decent strength of schedule. I think that it definitely is stronger than what Michigan's was. But, I don't know if it's better than what Washington's is. All right, and the weakest strength of schedule out of the top 4 teams is Georgia. So Georgia's played up against teams like Mizzou. Okay, Auburn was a big rivalry game. Ole Miss. Auburn's definitely not a great team. Ole Miss is a higher ranked team, so we can talk about Mizzou and Ole Miss. Ole Miss comes down to Athens and plays up against Georgia, and they end up losing like 3 or 4 of their best players. A lot of those guys being front 7 guys. And if you're new to this channel, one thing that I can tell you is we are big on front 7 play here. Okay, that's what football is all about. It's all about front 7 play. And losing your front 7 pieces, especially versus a team like Georgia on the road, can really hurt you in that game. But saying all that just to say that those are probably the best 2 teams that Georgia has faced all season. Hasn't been a gauntlet of a schedule for them, relatively speaking, versus what SEC schedules usually are. So, I'm not too upset with them being ranked dead last, but what I would do is I would just flip-flop Georgia and Michigan in the strength of schedule. If it was me doing this, I would say that strongest strength of schedule would be Washington. Then I would probably go Florida State, and then I would go, Georgia. And I think that you could probably interchange Georgia or Florida State. Okay, there's a lot of arguments to be made on both sides of that, but I would most definitely have Michigan as dead last because, again, Ohio State's the best team that they had to play up against all season, and Ohio State just is not that good of a football team. I think if you put them in the SEC or in the ACC, that they lose 2 to 3 games at least. Penn State would probably lose 3 to 4 games at least. Now let's look at the rest of the top 8 and look at their strength of schedule. Okay, so Oregon is at number 62 in the country, which is an absolute and total joke because Ohio State is at number 6. Someone please tell me how. I guess because they played up against Notre Dame that they were, ranked higher. But Notre Dame is not that good of a football team. We saw that as the season went on. Okay, Texas somehow is ranked at number 13, and Alabama, I have absolutely no idea how this is possible, is ranked at number 31. All right, again, guys, I'm not trying to be an SEC homer, but can we all just be honest? Can we please just all be honest for 2 seconds? How in the world is Ohio State's schedule more difficult than Texas or definitely Alabama? That is a joke. So again, this is all because the CFP and the powers that be are trying to make sure that they can have a representative from 4 different regions in this country to ensure that the TV ratings are as high as possible and that they can make as many dollars as possible. Okay, and I'm not too mad at them for that, but what I would rather them do is come out and say, hey, it's not about the best 4 teams. It's about, the 4 teams that we want to put in there, or the 4 teams that are going to give us the most money. Obviously, next season, we'll have to deal with this because we're going to a 12-team playoff. We'll deal with it to some degree, but it won't be as bad as it has been this season. Now, I want to tell you what my top 4 would be if it's just the 4 best teams in this country. So without a doubt, in no particular order, it would be Georgia, Alabama, and Texas. I think that these 3 teams are the best top to bottom whenever you're talking about size, speed, different types of offenses, different types of defenses, just being able to compete with anything that's going to be thrown at them in all 3 phases of the football game. These 3 teams are the best for sure. Now, outside of that, who's going to fit into that number 4 spot? Okay, so we've got Michigan, Florida State. I would say Oregon and Washington. Ohio State, to me, is not really even in that conversation. Again, Big Ten ball. I just don't even get me back started on that because I don't want to go deep down that rabbit hole anymore. I've already kind of made my points about them. There's not a whole lot of offense being played. I just do not see Ohio State as a top 4 team, period. So out of the ones that are left, okay, I would say that if you look at Washington and Oregon, okay, again, Pac-12 ball, great offenses, not a whole lot of defenses, but I do think that these 2 teams play pretty solid defense. Now, their front 7 play, which again is what football is all about, is not going to be as strong as Michigan or Florida State's. And for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and knock them out of my potential top 4 teams. I just want to give y'all an explanation on why they will not be making my personal top 4. Now, if you look at Michigan versus Florida State, okay, I feel like if Florida State had their starting quarterback, there would be no question they would be at number 4. But since they don't, it's going to get very interesting, okay? If you look at the way that Michigan likes to play, again, it's going to be very run heavy, and it's going to be all about front 7 play. Even though Florida State does not have their starting quarterback, I think that they could match up very well with their athletes versus Michigan because, they've got a lot of studs, okay, on both sides of that football. They've got a lot of studs. They're really deep, guys who can really ball. But at the end of the day, whenever you get into some of these playoff situations, football is going to come down to the quarterbacks are going to have to make some good plays, some good throws at some point in this game. And, it could end up coming down to who has the better quarterback. And I think that that edge definitely goes to Michigan. So, that could go one of 2 ways, but just for the sake of this video, I would put Michigan in my top 4. All right, so that's my top 4. I would love to hear what y'all's are. Please leave it down in the comments section. Again, best 4 football teams in this country, regardless of their ranks. Thank y'all so much for tuning into this video. Please make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your friends, family, and other college football fans, and we will see y'all on the next one. Thanks. Peace.